Sweden is famous for ABBA, IKEA, Volvo, but also leading tech companies like Klarna or Spotify. Klarna founder is actually a Polish-Swedish person, just like my today's guest, Piotr Stepinski. Piotr, it's a great pleasure to have you here. How are you doing?
Likewise, it's great to be here. I'm doing excellent. Great weather here, so the energy is on top right now.
But you're in Poland or you're in Sweden at the moment?
I'm actually in Warsaw, Poland. I live here since many years back, but I have a strong Swedish background, as you will find out soon.
Okay. If you could tell a few words what you're currently doing, what is your position at Merix? What are your fields of interest?
Okay, so I'm working with Merix for half a year now, and I'm doing business development. So I'm responsible of acquiring new customers, guiding them through our software creation process and taking care of them. And I have a strong focus on Scandinavian markets, Sweden in particular, since I used to live there for many years back.
Okay, thank you for this. You travel often to Sweden. Have you noticed in recent years some changes, some major shifts within the IT industry, within the startup ecosystem, and let's say the wide span of tech in Sweden?
Yeah, I think Sweden is a great example of a country where the tech it's a tech leader, not only in Europe but in the whole wide world. So many of the pioneering ideas come from Sweden actually, and it's been like this for many years. So obviously, looking at the Swedish market and what is happening there among startups, but also among larger companies, you can also probably predict some trends that will go global later on as well. So obviously, right now there are a lot of trends. Firstly, in terms of markets and categories, there's a lot of trends on in green tech, sustainability, and things like that. There's also a trend in cybersecurity and in defense technologies. I hope we can talk more about these particular areas later on. But obviously, also Sweden has been struck by in the last few years by let's say a recession in terms of new companies, in terms of capital available to fund these companies as well. So also there is a trend of, let's say, a more thought through startup ideas that get funded, while the other ones that used to get funding before might have difficult times to find funding. So definitely the climate is more competitive right now, and it's more difficult to actually fund your idea and to make the idea a breakthrough.
But Scandinavians are famous for their pragmatism, yes, for not falling too much into emotions. So I guess one way or another, they will solve the issues that they are currently facing. Um, you mentioned a couple of verticals already. You mentioned the defense, you mentioned the green tech. Uh, which other verticals or industries are uh, potentially perhaps not flourishing, but may be able to make some progress in upcoming years?
Okay, so I'd like to continue with these three areas that I already mentioned. So I actually visit Sweden a lot and go to different branch events and trade shows and meetups and other events. So I get to see what is actually going on right now. So one of the areas where I think it's a lot is happening is like green technology around sustainability and around green energy, etc. So just to mention a couple of examples, there's a lot of things happening in power, basically both in terms of solar power, where there's a lot of new technology in terms of new types of solar cells that can actually harvest energy even in difficult light circumstances, even in indoor light circumstances. And there's also a lot of going on in the software area of power, like virtual power plants, where AI can optimize when to produce the power, how to use it, so that it is optimally used without any waste. So definitely power within green tech is something that I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot in zero waste. So in zero waste in terms of food, like systems that monitor freshness in shops and restaurants,
Okay.
to make sure that there is no waste of food. There is also a lot of startups within circular fashion, where different materials are created and different platforms are created where users can basically trade clothing and be more sustainable. So that is definitely something, the green tech, and there's a lot of different areas within green tech as well, like agriculture. So this is definitely something that is very strong, and Sweden is a pioneer in ecology and green approach since many years, basically decades back. So this is definitely something where you want to see what will happen in the world. Sweden is a good pioneer in terms of what is happening. So basically, green tech, I think, is the most growing visible trend right now. Another trend which is having a boom right now with investors is defense technologies. Basically, the war in Ukraine has triggered a lot of new startups and new ventures in this area. Sweden just joined NATO recently, so this has even triggered this technology area a lot. And Sweden traditionally has very good defense technology. Looking at the population, which is fairly small, Sweden produces their own aircraft, tanks, and a lot of other weaponry and radar systems, etc., etc. So traditionally, Sweden is very good with defense technology, but you are now seeing a lot of these new generation startups, electric boats, electric airplanes, apps that can reconstruct terrain efficiently, and other like AI-based analysis systems to make sure that the community, not only the army but the community, is well organized in terms of in a situation where war begins, basically. So I think defense tech is something where also NATO invests a lot in. So like a very hot area right now is this defense technology startup sector. And I think the third one, I recently visited something called Tech Arena, which is the biggest trade show for IT in Scandinavia. And there was a very high highlight also there in cybersecurity. So basically vulnerability assessments, very advanced identification systems, and like technologies that will allow big companies, governments, etc., prevent attacks and make systems more stable and secure. So basically, these three areas are, I think, very interesting to look at. The common denominator here is basically AI. I didn't say AI because AI is hot everywhere and it's like say self-explanatory. But in all these three areas, green tech, defense tech, cybersecurity, like the main technology behind these products, startups, is obviously artificial intelligence. So I didn't mention that because it's everywhere in most of the tech startups right now.
All right, then. Thank you very much. Very comprehensive introduction. I need to mention by myself, because this is also a field of my private interest, that the cooperation between Poland and Sweden when it comes to defense systems is increasing. Poland has purchased its first early warning airplanes from Sweden. We are also working on radar early recognition boats, and Sweden is also participating in a tender for the submarines. Yeah, so most likely the cooperation between Poland and Sweden in terms of defense will be increasing. I have a question regarding the cultural aspect. Yes, because what I'm hearing is that you have a nation of a relatively small population, which is very pragmatic and is very oriented on managing efficiently, sometimes even limited resources. We know obviously that Sweden has a lots of timber, wood, but also steel, which is also famous for. But the population, correct me if I'm wrong, is around 10 million. And but the impact, the economic impact that Sweden is making is quite significant. If you compare their population with their impact on the European economy. So, what do you think about the Swedish culture? How this, let's say, being post-Viking nation helped becoming, let's say, a tech hub in recent years, yeah, or not just in
First,
recent years.
First of all, I think it's both cultural and demographical because as a
Hmm.
small nation, Sweden has always had a quite a small domestic market, which
Hmm.
means that the companies that want to achieve success always naturally went abroad with their ideas, with their products. So if you compare to, for instance, Germany, which is a big internal market on its own, in Sweden, as you said, 10 million inhabitants, it's a fairly small domestic market. So companies always, let's say this is both a carrot and a stick, because you have to kind of motivate yourself to go to try harder, basically. So I think historically, looking at the first really big successes in Sweden that especially arrived after World War II, it has always been, you know, the will to kind of go over the frontier to deliver the product. So I think the demographical part is definitely important. The culture part, of course, as well. Sweden originally 100 years ago and longer than that was a very poor country.
Uh-huh.
It had a very big emigration to the United States in the 19th century, and it was basically very poor. So it kind of the tradition to work hard has been there for a very long time. And as you mentioned, Swedes are creative and approach problems in a very practical way. I think this is also something that comes from the Swedish school system. I failed to mention before that I actually moved to Sweden with my family from Poland when I was 2 years old and
Right.
went through all the schools. I also went to university in Sweden. So and, I can see that also the approach in the school system is very encouraging for creativity. So I think, focusing in schools on cooperation rather than competition, and letting students, children freely think outside of the box has definitely made also big successes in terms of these wonders that you mentioned before.
All right then. Uh, okay, but there's a reason which brought you back to Poland, yeah?
Yes, also, yes, because I am a Swedish Polish hybrid, you can say. So one of my Swedish, I would say, traits is curiosity. Also, curiosity how the world works. Curiosity, like Sweden again is a small country. We are
Uh-huh.
hungry to see how the world looks like, young Swedes often start after high school, go traveling for a year before they go to
Okay.
university, just to see what is going on in the
Mm-hmm.
world, and realizing that Sweden is a small place, so you have to kind of adapt and learn a lot of new things. So
Uh-huh.
I guess this is the same thing with me as well. After finishing university in Uppsala in Sweden, I basically thought that it would be great to get some experience from abroad. And
Okay.
because I was born in Poland and have Polish parents, Poland was a low-hanging fruit for me.
Okay.
So I went just to get any job that I could get my hands on in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. And now, around 15 years later, I'm here. I have a family here and
Uh-huh.
have a really good time and a good fit care also in the Polish community.
All right then. Thank you for this. Mm, let's get back to the cultural aspect.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's a stereotype. You will be a judge here. Uh, but there is, let's say, a stereotype saying that people from Nordics, which includes Swedish people, are very straightforward. For example, when it comes to business communication, when it comes to feedback, when it comes to providing information. Like they don't mess around with communication. They are very direct. Is it true?
Both yes and no. Swedes
Hmm.
appreciate honesty and
Hmm.
appreciate of receiving. They are very well with receiving feedback. So
Okay.
it's a natural thing in Sweden to, if you want to communicate something to someone, you do it, and the other person will not get offended by it, but will treat it more as a constructive criticism. So I
Okay.
think that is definitely something worth mentioning. That in terms of honesty, this is very, very, very highly rated in Sweden. Also in business. Let's say that the word a word is or a handshake is everything, and you don't need a signature to kind of cement the handshake is enough so the trust is there. And of course, trust means that you have to be honest and tell it what it is. So Swedes are very appreciative of feedback, and treat negative feedback also as something constructive rather than to get offended. There is a certain amount of let's say avoidance of conflict
Okay.
in the Scandinavian countries. So that's why I also mentioned no in
Hmm.
this situation. When there is a big problem, when there is a let's say something that is an issue, you might have to read between the lines to kind of understand the situation. So uh, I think that that kind of summarizes what you asked for, like honesty, timeliness, organization, and just telling the situation, describing the situation as it is, rather than painting a nice picture to not upset anyone, is definitely a good way to go. And this is also sometimes kind of a clash between Polish and Swedish culture, because Poles are generally less prone to constructive criticism, and sometimes have a this little bit of an emotion reaction to it, while in Sweden
That a little bit.
yeah, it's quite different. So in my terms, I have a lot of observation coming from two cultures where there are differences, but there are more similarities than differences, basically.
All right then. Thank you very much. We've been talking a little bit about the culture, about the economic background, about Swedish population, but we've been also touching trends. Yes, we mentioned green energy, sustainability, defense. Uh, what kind of services could be useful for Swedish ecosystem? I mean, big tech companies, medium tech companies, and startups. Yes, what is perhaps missing in this, let's say, picture, and what Swedes would appreciate to be delivered, yeah, by, for example, Polish tech companies.
Yes, I think that in terms of, for instance, Polish tech companies versus Swedish, let's say Swedish business climate, something that is, I think, very visible is the level of knowledge, the level of technical knowledge among Polish developers and among Polish talent, which is also, let's say, a treat of the Polish school system, which has traditionally been quite focused on mathematics and those, let's say, harder subjects. And it shows quite well. So I think the pool of talent and the level of the best talent, so-called experts, is very high in Poland and very appreciated in Sweden, where this talent is not as vast as in Poland, for instance. So I would say that one thing which is very good is basically the level of knowledge and the level of persons. For instance, in Poland. So I can see a lot of companies looking for the very, very best experts within, let's say, cybersecurity or very particular areas where simply the local pool is not enough to take from. So I think that is definitely one thing. I think also that Polish culture is more open to attacking problems as they appear. So like more of a, it's difficult to explain, but while in Sweden it's very good to have everything in order and organized, but obviously crap happens sometimes, and then it's difficult to kind of approach it in a sane and creative way. And I think in Poland we have a more straightforward approach to things arriving when and as they do. So I think that also the creativity within this area, that a solution can be a solution A, B, C, D, or D. There's always a solution to a problem. So I think this approach is also definitely something that is highly valued in Scandinavian countries and Sweden. So it is a good team, of well-organized machinery, but with a flavor of creativity and spontaneity as well. And that in all areas, whether it be coding or building a house, there are always problems that appear that aren't planned for. So I think this is definitely something that is worth mentioning. And the last thing as well, I think, which is highly appreciative in Swedish culture, circling back to the honesty, Swedes would like to hear how the problem looks like, even if it's a bad problem. They don't want to sugarcoat it. They want to receive the full report. They can also take criticism. For instance, if for instance a Polish development team thinks that the solution, the idea that the customer from Sweden has is not optimal, they are also open to hearing other solutions and brainstorming. So they are open to discussing problems, cooperating more on a partnership level rather than a level where there's a customer and the vendor, basically. So I think that is definitely something also that is very, very well appreciated, to find the best way to create software, to create things.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I must admit that my personal experience of working, let's say in general, with Nordics, yes, is that people from Nordics or stakeholders from Nordics, they have some natural easiness in outlining requirements. Yeah, like for example, when they hand over a project to you, the goals are well described. The tech stack is explained why this particular tech stack should be taken. They are also open to recommendations. Daily based communication is very good. Yeah, like we are talking about Sweden, we are talking about Nordics in general, but we are aiming to forget that it's 1 hour flight. It's the same time zone. It's this, to be honest, small lake that is between us, and the distance between, let's say, Gdańsk and Stockholm is, I presume, like from Stockholm to Helsinki, something like that. Yes, so the distances are very short. It is extremely easy to travel both ways. The communication is good. Nordics are also famous for very good command in English. Yes, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. So it's easy to cooperate in such environment on IT projects. Yes, where there is lots of detail, when there is lots of competition, and where there is, let's say, very high demand for quality, I would say. Yeah?
Yeah.
This is something that we need to keep in mind. You mentioned a little bit green tech and sustainability. Do you reckon any, let's say, I don't know, trends or directions within this space that may be flourishing? Like, I don't know, for example, mobile applications for waste management, or web application for data analysis, something like in particular, 1 or 2 things that you predicted maybe desired in the Nordics.
Well, I think that this green tech has really sped up, and in my opinion, there's no return here. There are a lot of skeptics everywhere that say that it's just a trend, something that is forced upon us by the European Union. But to be frank, the war in Ukraine has shown us also that we need to kind of be more self-reliant, self-sustainable. So the trend is definitely going towards self-sustainability. So, for instance, in green tech, and this kind of self-sustainability / sustainability, not to waste anything, because the times are more difficult. We don't know how the future will look like, is definitely something that is, especially in green tech, the kind of the main theme in all these startups and all these ideas. So you mentioned, so for instance, we have solar power. So in a basic system of solar power known to most people, you have solar cells on your roof, and those solar cells can power parts of your own production in your home, and you can sell the excess of this energy produced when there is access to the power grid, basically. But if you go deeper into this, you will find, for instance, something called virtual power plants, where you can actually optimize the production, both from a customer's point of view. So, for instance, if you're a customer and you have solar cells on your roof, you can optimize this production. You can, for instance, have an app where you can get feedback, but you can also control when, for instance, produce the power. When, for instance, you use the power to kind of power your own house, when you can use the power to fill up a battery, which can store the power. If you have an electric vehicle, which many people in Sweden, Norway especially do, you can also optimize this by charging your electric vehicle, but also treat it as a battery, so the electric vehicle can also power things in your house as well. So we see a lot of things around optimization of this energy production and energy usage as well. And there are multiple apps where you can both as a customer optimize this usage, learn. Also, this software has their artificial intelligence part, which can actually optimize the whole consumption and production of your own power plant on your roof, for instance. But it also is software for bigger companies like power grid companies, power producers, to kind of optimize also the production and consumption. Because with the more solar cells we have on our roofs, the more production that comes from this renewable source of energy, the more potential waste there can also be of this energy. We don't have a perfect system to store energy yet, but it's growing. That segment is growing as well. So we kind of have to focus on the use on the most efficient use of this energy. And here software is it's all software based, basically, the algorithm, everything. It's not about the hardware. There's a lot of things happening in the hardwares. There are better solar cells, better solar batteries, better transmission capabilities of the networks, but it's right now it's all about the software. So I think that is definitely one of the trends in terms of energy production and consumption, especially where electric vehicles and other things come into play. And as you mentioned, there are also a lot of solutions around both for customers, like end users, B2C customers, but also for companies. For instance, within food, you have for restaurants, for instance, or grocery stores, you have software that basically analyzes with the help of Internet of Things and AI your current level of food and the freshness of food in your restaurant or shop. And also, as an end user, as a consumer, you have different types of apps where you can basically find good deals on food that is, for instance, close to its expiry date. So I think like it's also a very nice circle within food production and food waste and things like that. So we are seeing a lot of this as well. Where you as a consumer, as a average person, can do a lot also to contribute. Small things, but small things. It starts with small things, and the big things are also built with small things as well. So I think is a lot of stuff happening right now.
Yes, and you touched very sensitive topic. I mean the power grid and power management in, let's say, photovoltaic systems, installments, because also in Poland we are noticing, let's say, major fluctuations when it comes to the power delivered coming from the photovoltaics. And this kind of surprised our country, which was supporting photovoltaic installments. But I spoke yesterday with Austrian data analysis company representative, and they said that this is very common problem, and software that will be helping to manage the surplus of power generated by renewable sources will be taking key role for the entire vertical.
Exactly.
Okay then. In the beginning of our conversation, we mentioned Volvo, SAP, IKEA, Klarna, Spotify. Do you predict any unicorn coming soon?
Yes, I think there's a lot of very interesting ideas out there. Obviously, to become a unicorn, statistically, you have a very long way in front of you, and that the chances of no success versus success, it's a big risk. But as I mentioned, Swedes are curious, hungry, risk taking. So there's a lot of companies on my radar, but I have picked three ones that I find particularly interesting in the last in the last, let's say, this year. So one of the companies that are doing a lot in the area where we just finished the topic, virtual power plants, power grid management, is a company called Fever. Fever provides software for mainly for the producers of energy and for the big companies to optimize production and consumption and power line usage, the infrastructure, to make waste as small as possible. And these guys have received a lot of funding lately. It's started by people that used to work in Spotify and other big unicorns in Sweden. So this is definitely something that I'm very curious about to see how it goes. Another company also within green tech, as mentioned, the biggest trend right now is in green tech. So there's a lot of interesting companies in that area. Is a company called Exeger, and they basically are building the hardware part. So where Fever is the software part, Exeger has created solar cells that transform basically any kind of light into energy, including indoor lighting. So I'm very curious to see the development here as well, but because, as you know, the traditional solar cells that we have on our roofs at the moment are far from optimal and not working nearly as efficiently as they could be in the future. So I'm very curious also on the hardware part, new types of materials used to create cells. And this company is one of the companies that have a quite interesting product and some also initial success in terms of investors, funding, etc., etc. And the third company, which I think it's a less known player, but I think it's a great example of artificial intelligence. It's a startup. It's a brand new startup called Cura, and they basically want to revolutionize legal work. So Cura wants to provide users, so lawyers and other, let's say, legal professionals, with a way to find, extract, and present any kind of legal data, because extracting legal data can sometimes be hard and time-consuming, requires many hours. And in theory, their product is able to extract this data, process it with artificial intelligence, anticipate what the customer wants, and present it in a neat, nice way, with no, let's say, time wasted on dead ends, which probably is also a problem at this moment. Something, I don't know if you watched the Google conference recently, something that Google also wants to do with their search engine. So not just a search engine, but more of a discussion partner or someone to brainstorm your ideas with. So this is definitely something that I think is also interesting. But there are very many companies recently in tech arena. In Stockholm, I saw electric powered snowmobiles and other things like that. So it's a lot of things happening right now, and it was very hard to pick just three of these companies.
Okay, then. Thank you very much for this. I think it was a pleasant conversation. I hope that our viewers will take some value out of it. Please do not hesitate to contact Piotr. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you have any suggestions about this episode or future episodes. If you would like to learn more about the technological solutions that we can provide, if you would like to learn a little bit more about the Swedish and Nordics landscape, I'm very, very grateful. My name is Mike Tsevsky, and thank you. It's time to talk.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. And any feedback, even critical or constructive, will be highly appreciated.
Piotr is half Swedish, so he will appreciate it very much.